Some drivers make you hold your breath when you watch them race. Gilles Villeneuve made me think of funerals. I do not say that to be dramatic. I say it because I'd been to too many of them. Jim Clark, Jochen Rindt, Piers Courage, Francois Sevet, men I raced with, men I respected, men I buried. When you have stood at that many gravesides, you start to recognize a pattern, not in the crashes, in the behavior before the crashes, in the way people talk about a driver who scares them and call it excitement, in the way nobody wants to be the one who says, maybe this is too much. And Gilles scared me, not because he lacked talent. He had more talent than almost anyone I had ever seen. What scared me was that the whole world looked at Gilles Villeneuve and saw courage. They saw a man who refused to surrender, who drove every single lap as if it were his last. I saw that too. But I also saw something else. I saw a driver who was racing beyond the limit that this sport should allow. And I knew, the way you know when you have seen it before, that one day this story would not end with cheering. It would end with silence. But I need you to understand something first. I need you to understand why nobody wanted to hear what I had to say about Gilles. Because the world loved him, and I mean loved him in a way that Formula One rarely produces. The Tifosi at Monza, at Imola, they did not just support Gilles, they worshipped him. He was not Italian, he was a French Canadian from a small town in Quebec. But the moment he put on that red suit and climbed into a Ferrari, none of that mattered. He was theirs. And it was not hard to see why. Dijon, 1979, the French Grand Prix, Gilles and René Arnoux, wheel to wheel, lap after lap, overtaking, re-overtaking, cars touching at nearly 200 miles per hour. People still call it the greatest battle in the history of Formula One. And maybe it was, but when I watched it, I did not see beauty. I saw two men who should have been dead. That was always the difference between how the world saw Gilles and how I saw him. Other dangerous drivers made you afraid. Gilles did not. Gilles made danger look beautiful. He made the impossible look effortless. The car would be sliding, the rear stepping out, sparks flying, and Gilles would catch it every single time. Like it was nothing. Like the laws of physics were just suggestions. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Because when danger looks beautiful, nobody wants it to stop. Finishing second means you are the first person to lose. That is what Gilles believed. Every lap, every race, every qualifying session. No compromise, no calculation. Just flat out, always. The world loved Gilles because he drove as if tomorrow did not exist. But in motorsport, tomorrow not existing is a real possibility. Let me be very clear about something. I never said Gilles Villeneuve was not talented. That would be a lie. Gilles had more natural ability behind the wheel than almost anyone in the history of this sport. What I said was this: he overdrove more than he needed to. And there is a difference between those two things that people never wanted to understand. Watkins Glen, 1979. Gilles lost a tire, not a puncture. The entire tire came off the car, 3 wheels. And Gilles kept driving. He dragged that broken Ferrari around the circuit, sparks pouring from the rim, and the crowd went absolutely mad for it. Standing ovation. The whole grandstand on their feet. I watched that and I felt sick. Not because of the spectacle, because I knew what it meant. It meant Gilles did not know when to stop. He did not recognize the moment where bravery crosses over into something else, something that gets people killed. And the worst part was the cycle. I could see it so clearly. Gilles would push beyond what was necessary. The crowd would cheer, and because the crowd cheered, Gilles would push further next time. And then they would cheer louder, and he would push further again. The more people cheered, the harder Gilles pushed. And I knew that one day the cheering would stop, not because anyone chose to stop, but because there would be nothing left to cheer for. I drove to survive first and to win second. Gilles drove to win and never thought about surviving at all. I calculated every corner. Gilles attacked every corner. I knew when enough was enough. Gilles never believed enough existed. He was good enough to win without risking his life every single lap. That is what made it so painful. He had the talent to be smarter. He just never believed he needed to be. 4. People think I became interested in safety because I was afraid. That is not true. I became interested in safety because I was tired of going to funerals. In the late 1960s, I started pushing for change, better barriers, proper medical facilities at circuits, helmets that actually worked, runoff areas, fire extinguishers that could reach a car in time, basic things, things that should not have been controversial, but they were. The paddock did not just disagree with me, they despised me for it. I was called soft, I was called a coward. I was told that if I was so afraid of dying, perhaps I should find another profession. Danger was not a problem to be solved. Danger was the point. It was what made a real driver real. If you feared death, you did not belong in a cockpit. That was the culture. Fearlessness was not just admired, it was worshipped. And in that religion, Gilles Villeneuve was the perfect God. But I was not speaking from theory, I was speaking from memory. Jim Clark, the greatest driver of his generation. Many say the greatest of all time. Dead at Hockenheim, 1968, gone in an instant. Jochen Rindt, so fast, so brilliant, killed at Monza, 1970. They gave him the championship after he was already in the ground, a world champion who never knew he was one. Francois Sever, my teammate, the man I thought of as a younger brother, Watkins Glen, 1973. I was supposed to retire after that race. I retired before it because Francois died in qualifying and I could not bring myself to drive again. Each time there was silence. The paddock went quiet, people looked at their shoes, and each time the silence faded. The cars went back on track, the crowd came back, and everything continued as if nothing had happened. Every time I spoke about safety, people thought I was talking about rules. I was talking about the friends I had buried. That is what makes it exciting for spectators. That is what they told me. Excitement. That was the word they used while my friends were dying. And Gilles was giving them exactly what they wanted. More speed, more risk, more of that beautiful, intoxicating danger that made the grandstands roar. But that feeling had a price. And Gilles would be the one to pay it. And then came Imola, San Marino Grand Prix, the 25th of April, 1982. And everything changed. Ferrari had a plan, a simple one, hold position. Gilles was leading, Pironi was behind him. The team expected them to stay that way until the checkered flag. Pironi did not stay. On the final lap, Didier Pironi overtook Gilles Villeneuve, his own teammate, against the team order. In front of the Tifosi, at Imola in a Ferrari, Gilles did not see it as losing a race. Gilles saw it as betrayal, not a sporting disagreement, not a misunderstanding. Betrayal from the one person on the grid who was supposed to be on his side. From that moment, Gilles refused to speak to Pironi. Not a word. Not in the motorhome, not in the debrief, not anywhere. 2 weeks of silence, 2 weeks of anger building with nowhere to go. Gilles had always said, I will drive flat out all the time. That had always been his philosophy, his way of seeing the sport. But after Imola, it was no longer a philosophy. It became an oath. I had watched Gilles drive on instinct his entire career. But after Imola, for the first time, I saw him driving on anger. And there is a difference that matters more than people realize. Instinct can save you. It is fast, it reacts, it adapts. A driver running on instinct can find the limit and dance along the edge of it. Anger does none of those things. Anger only pushes. And at those speeds, pushing without thinking is the most dangerous thing in motorsport. Belgian Grand Prix, Zolder, the 8th of May, 1982, qualifying. Gilles walked out of the garage and looked at the timing screen. Pironi was faster. Didier Pironi, the man Gilles had not spoken to in 2 weeks, the man who had taken what Gilles believed was rightfully his at Imola, was sitting at the top of the timesheet. Gilles climbed into the car. This was not a normal qualifying session. This was not about securing a grid position. This was personal. This was 2 weeks of silence and fury compressed into a single lap at over 250 kilometers per hour. The final run. Gilles came upon the slower march of Jochen Mass. What happened next took only a few seconds. Contact, the Ferrari launched into the air, and then there was nothing anyone could do. I will not describe the details. That is not what this is about. What I will tell you is what came after. Silence. 10 minutes earlier, they had been on their feet, cheering as Gilles pulled out of the pit lane. 10 minutes earlier, the grandstands were alive with the sound that Gilles always created. That roar, that electricity, that worship. 10 minutes later, nobody could look at the circuit. Silence in the paddock. Silence on the Ferrari pit wall. Silence from the mechanics who had just sent him out. Silence from the commentators. Silence from the crowd that had been screaming his name moments before. I had heard that silence before. After Jim Clark, the paddock went quiet. After Jochen Rindt, the paddock went quiet. After François Severt, the paddock went quiet. It was always the same silence, heavy, disbelieving, final. And I knew something else about that silence. It would not last. It never lasted. But in that moment, Formula One was forced to see the other side of what it had been celebrating. The other side of the mythology. The other side of making danger beautiful and calling recklessness courage and telling a man that his willingness to die was what made him great. Gilles did not die simply because he was driving too fast. Gilles died while trying to prove something to Pironi, to Ferrari, to himself. He died with anger in his heart and a point to make. And at that speed, carrying that weight, even all the talent in the world was not enough. That is exactly what I had been warning about for years. When emotion replaces calculation, talent cannot save you. It never could. Didier Pironi himself suffered a terrible crash at Hockenheim later that same season. His legs were shattered. His career was over. 1982 became the darkest season in modern Formula One. Everything I had warned about came true. All of it. I want to make one thing clear before I finish. I was never against Gilles Villeneuve. I could never be against Gilles Villeneuve. He was extraordinary. He was unforgettable. He was one of the most beautiful racers I have ever seen. When Gilles was in a car, you could not look away. That is a gift that almost nobody in this sport has ever had. But I was against the system that surrounded him. I was against a culture that turned recklessness into heroism, that made danger into spectacle, that told a young man his willingness to die was what made him legendary, and then looked away when the bill came due. Beauty does not eliminate danger. Mythology does not change reality. And admiration, no matter how deep, cannot protect anyone. Decades later, Formula One changed. The halo, wider runoff areas, medical helicopters that arrive in minutes, barriers that absorb impact instead of destroying cars. The things I was asking for when they called me a coward eventually became the standard. I was proven right. But that is not a victory, because being proven right always came the same way. Someone had to die first. And what frightens me most is not the crashes. It is that people forget so quickly. Silence after Jim Clark, then they forgot. Silence after Jochen Rindt, then they forgot. Silence after François Sauveur, then they forgot. Silence after Gilles, then they forgot again. Always the same pattern. Grief, then silence, then forgetting, until the next time. That is what I fought against my entire life. Not danger itself, but the forgetting. Gilles Villeneuve was not just a racing driver. He was the most beautiful dream Formula One ever had, and also its most painful warning